I pictured when I pull this trigger, she's going to be the one to walk in and find the mess. You know, and that was that thing every night that I would think about that made me not follow through with it. Because I just wanted to pull the trigger, you know? It's just like, man, just end it. What are you waiting for?
Thank you for watching this episode of VetBiz TV. I'm sitting here with Noah Currier, the founder of Oscar Mike and the Oscar Mike Foundation. It was founded in 2011, and he started it in a garage, just like some of the other famous businesses and organizations out there, such as Apple, Microsoft, and some of those other big corporations. But just to jump right into it, can you just tell everybody what was life like for Noah growing up?
Growing up, you know, it was pre-cell phone, pre-internet, and it was, you know, my dad was a former Marine too, so it was always, you know, if the sun was up, there was no reason to be inside. So it was always come home for dinner, and I you know, when I wasn't in school, and it was just a lot of time outside. You know, I played every sport that there was. Me and my brother both kept my mom extremely busy. You know, we were 6.5 years apart from each other, but we both played every sport that there was. So she would leave, you know, like basketball practice at for one of us to go to the other one, baseball practice, football practice, karate lessons, you know, BMX, taking us to the tracks, boxing, you know, like you name it, we did everything. And so I think we just, you know, it was probably rough on her. I think about that now, and I don't even know how she made all that possible. You know, so we played a lot of sports, me and my brother, and we spent a lot of time outside.
That's awesome. Moms are pretty amazing people in our lives. You know, they make a lot of things happen, and sometimes you wonder when you get older, you're like, holy smokes, how did that just happen?
Oh, I used to get so mad at her when she would drop me off a few minutes late at practice, and I'd have to run laps, you know, and I remember like always just being so angry about that when I was a kid, like, God, I gotta run laps again, you know, like we gotta get here on time. And then you get older and you're like, I don't even know how she got me there. You know, like she's running all over like a chicken with her head cut off.
So did you grow up in this area, or did, you know, your dad being in the military, did you move a lot of places?
No, I grew up here. Yeah.
So your dad, where was he stationed?
My dad actually, he adopted me when I was five years old, maybe 6, somewhere right around there.
Wow.
We moved after he adopted me, we moved from the suburbs of Chicago. We had moved around a bunch over there, and then we moved out here into the middle of nowhere, middle of a cornfield, and I've lived here ever since, other than, you know, my time in the military.
What were some of the most important things that you did growing up that you learned from that have helped you out today?
I was always, you know, like I always wanted something and my parents, you know, probably wouldn't buy for me. So if I wanted a BMX bike, or if I wanted something, I had to figure out how to get it for myself. So I started a lot of like businesses as a kid. I remember I went around to garage sales, and the first summer I bought a push mower so I didn't have to use my dad's because he wouldn't let me, you know, and I started mowing lawns. And then more and more people kept asking if I could do theirs, but there wasn't enough time in a weekend for me to do them. So I would recruit my friends and keep buying lawnmowers and fixing them up from garage sales. And then I would give my friends, you know, sections of lawns, say, you're doing this address and you're doing this address. And I would just take a cut, you know, even as a little kid. And it got to the point where I think we were doing, you know, 100 or 200 lots in a weekend.
Wow.
And yeah, I was doing pretty well as a kid. I almost think that I should go back to that business. And then I started a little bike shop in my garage because I was a BMX racer, and, you know, I competed in skate park competitions and stuff all the time. So I was real familiar with bikes, and trained for triathlons with my dad. And ever since I was a little kid, so I think at like maybe 12 years old, we started a bike shop, me and my buddy Scott, in my garage, and people would bring their bikes over to get fixed, and you know, we'd order parts. We had a relationship at 12 years old with dealers, and we would you know, get parts from them, and then, you know, I think from 15 years old on, I had at least 2 jobs at all times. I was a line boy at the airport down the road from my house, and so I'd, you know, clean planes and mow all the fields and the grass runways and do all the weed whacking for the place and some of the small like maintenance stuff. So I learned a lot of that stuff. I guess hard work, staying busy, and the necessity to, if you want something, you're going to have to work for it. 'Cause,
Sure.
Getting a handout from anybody or your parents, wasn't really an option.
You've had that hard work ethic your entire time. But what kind of inspired you to join the military then? Was it your dad, or was it just something like you were like, this is for me?
Yeah, my dad being a Marine, and he never really talked about it, not because he wasn't like traumatized by it. He just never really talked about it. But I was always curious and interested. So I would read books on it, or I watched Full Metal Jacket probably a million times. I could still rehearse or recite that entire movie from start to finish. So that was definitely an influence on me, but mostly him. I knew that the Marine Corps was the hardest branch of the military. You see the movies, you hear everybody talk about it, and so I had to pick that branch, and I knew that I was going to do something like that because I got in way too much trouble in school, and it was probably destined to be whether I wanted it to or not.
So what was your experience like in the military?
Joined in 2000, joined in peacetime. We hadn't had a war since '91, and that war lasted like 4 days. So I didn't think, I had no idea if I would ever have combat experience. And September 2001, about a year after I had joined, the towers got hit, and we were on a ship a couple days later and over the Middle East. Just some simple operations there, really just sitting out in the Indian Ocean, waiting to figure out, I think at some point during that deployment, they figured out that Afghanistan was the target, and that's where we were going to send everybody. So we were on ships full of equipment, just waiting for that intel to come through, and I think it was mostly just floating in the ocean, a little bit of convoy security into Pakistan, and nothing real serious. We called that Operation Enduring Boredom, and came back for a couple months, went back overseas, floated through that same ocean, wondering what we're gonna end up doing, and we were listening to the news and either watching whatever station is on a ship that like, what is it, AFN or Armed Forces Network or something, and then listening to BBC, because we knew that was a less biased, than what we were watching on TVs on ship. And we were listening to all the talks about possibly going to war with Iraq if they wouldn't comply with the UN weapons inspections, and it always seemed like every time we'd listen to see, all right, they're doing an inspection now, or did they get what they wanted? The UN would come back and say, yeah, they got everything they wanted, there's no weapons here. So the entire time we were thinking, we're not actually going to war, and none of us believed that we were doing it. We just thought we were floating out there as kind of like a show of force. And then we actually hit dirt in Kuwait, and we got a little bit closer to the border, and we still thought, we're just trying to show how big our junk is right now. And sat there for a while, for several weeks or a couple months, and then we moved right on the border, and then eventually March 19th, like 2 in the morning, we got the call and took out the guard shacks, and engineers blew through the berm, and we went racing through the berm, and the invasion started that night.
So what was life like when you came back to the States and transitioned?
Well, the first 3 days were amazing. It was a celebration. We were the very first, we were the first unit to cross the border, and we led the invasion. We were the point unit for the invasion for the Marine Corps. Other than like special forces and people that did stuff that nobody could see, all the cool Navy SEAL type stuff, I'm sure was all going on. And but as far as like ground troops for the military, we ran point, and we came back, and so because we were the first unit in, they let us be the first unit out. And so when we got back to the States and down in Southern California, we were like legends. You know, we just got back from a war, and the ones of us who made it through it got to tell all the stories. You know, and everybody wanted to hear them. And so those first 3 days were fun. That fourth day, me and a buddy were driving back from San Diego real late at night, and he just, you know, I drove down, he was driving back, and he fell asleep at the wheel right as we were turning onto Camp Pendleton, right at the gate there. And you know, the road curves, and he just kept driving straight, and at like 85 miles an hour, I think, foot on the gas, head down on the steering wheel, hit a tree and rolled down a hill a dozen times. I broke my neck in the accident. He broke a bunch of stuff. Fortunately, he didn't break his neck, you know, but yeah, so I broke my C5-6, and you know, paralyzed from, I guess you could say, the neck down, even though you know, like, it's not really technically correct, because you still preserve some arm muscles. Like, I got my biceps, I got left tricep, I got forearms and a little bit of wrist, you know, so I'm able to propel a wheelchair.
That's probably one of the hardest things you've had to experience. I mean, you just came back from war, you know, to endure that, you know, when you're on friendly ground.
Yeah.
But I mean, I was blown away when I first heard your story, and you know, that wasn't the only thing that happened.
So war, being paralyzed a few days later, spent a bunch of time in going through rehab and physical therapy at the VA. And I had been with this girl for about 7 years. Her name was Maureen, and actually it was 7.5 years at the time. And I finally got home, and you know, she was moving her stuff into my place, and she called me up late one night, said, hey, they're making me work late tonight, you know, so she just wanted to let me know. And I said, all right, I'll see you whenever you get here. And I woke up in the morning and she wasn't there, and then the phone rang, and it was really early in the morning, too early for the phone to be ringing normally. And it's like right when the phone started ringing, I knew that something was seriously wrong. And she had passed away, and she fell asleep at the wheel and died on her way home to my house that night. And that was the thing that broke me. You know, I think it was too soon for combat to have affected me, and it was even a little too soon for paralysis to have affected me, because I still thought I was going to get up and walk. You know, I thought if I just keep working hard, eventually I'll recover from this. So neither of those things had like fully set in yet, you know. And then losing her was that thing that just put me over the edge, and it was a rough patch after that, I mean, to say the least, you know. I wanted to hurt myself every day. I wanted to end it. I didn't want to be in a wheelchair. I didn't want to be without her. You know, I would see her in her casket all the time and remember exactly what she looked like. I could hear her laugh. I could, you know, and I didn't really have any desire to go on after that. But you know, it turned into drugs and drinking, and something I think that would make it easier for me to pull the trigger. You know, if I could just get messed up enough to follow through with it. But I was living with my mom at the time, and every time I would get to that point and I'd be shaking on the trigger, you know, I would think she had such a rough time between me being gone in Iraq, and then when I was in the hospital. You know, the part of the story that I didn't tell there was my mom was there for the parade, you know, when we landed back in California. And so she stayed with me those few days. I took her to the airport on the third day, gave her a hug, said I'd see you tomorrow, you know, because I was flying home the next morning.
Sure.
So I said, I'll see you tomorrow, Mom. You know, I said, I'm just going to go back and unpack my stereo and go to bed. And so she flew home, she landed, and when she walked in the front door, the phone was ringing. She picked up the phone, and they said, is this Diane? She said, yeah. And she said, you need to get to the hospital in Mission Viejo, California. We don't think that your son's going to make it. She's like, what are you talking about? I just saw him. And they said, well, he was in a very bad car accident, and it doesn't look good. He's not breathing on his own or anything like that. So She jumped back on a plane, flew back out. Then I woke up a few days later from a medically induced coma. It was about 5 days, and I woke up to the news that I was paralyzed. So I was living with her, and she had been through all of that, and now, I pictured when I pull this trigger, she's going to be the one to walk in and find the mess. And that was that thing every night that I would think about that made me not follow through with it, because I just wanted to pull the trigger. It's just like, man, just end it. What are you waiting for? I'm thinking, man, I'm going to destroy my mom, and I don't want to destroy her. I just want to take my own life. So without her even knowing, she, without even saying a word or knowing, she was saving my life every day just by living in the same house with me. And a friend of mine would ask me all the time to go skiing in Colorado, and for 2 years he was trying to get me to do it, and I would just say, dude, I'm a quadriplegic, I'm not going skiing, you're out of your mind. And eventually I did, and he was right. It was a game-changing experience for me. I think he knew what I needed much more than I knew what I needed, and got to the top of this mountain. I was looking over what seemed to be like planet Earth, because you feel like you can see everything from up there. And a switch had flipped right then in that moment, and I knew it and I felt it, and I asked the instructors that were with me to just hang on a minute while I looked, over the world. And now looking back at it, I know what it was. I was outside of my comfort zone. I was scared, which is something that we love, right? I mean, even when you join the military, even combat, doing a backflip on your bicycle, whatever it was like, the thing that made that so awesome was the fear going into it,
Sure.
And so I was experiencing that again right there. And I don't know, it was just that. And then I get to the bottom and I meet all these other guys who have these crazy stories, who are just as jacked up as I am. And, I wasn't alone, and a bunch of other guys had the same experience. So I think immediately after that, I was signed up for the National Veteran Wheelchair Games. And then I found myself sitting in a hotel lobby towards the end of the event, just shooting the shit with like 50 other guys in there. And everybody, the conversation was about how adaptive sports like changed you at some point, And for me, it was very recent. It had just happened. So I'm chiming in the conversation like, I know, I wouldn't even be here had I not done that one. And, now I want to do this and this, I immediately signed up to go skydiving, and I enrolled in school, and like all these things that I thought there's no way a quad can ever do that stuff, or I didn't even want to be in public. I didn't want to talk to anybody. I was, for several reasons, Maureen losing her, and then also my paralysis and being in a wheelchair. Like, I didn't picture myself like that, so I didn't want anybody else to see me like that. And those events were an eye-opener for me. But when I asked everybody if I would see them at the next one, there was always, everybody had the same response, and it was like, well, I don't know, if I can afford it, maybe. And like, wait a second. Right then, it was very obvious. It's like, money is the barrier of entry if you want to stay involved in adaptive sports, especially for like quadriplegics or anybody with really severe injuries, because you have to, a lot of times, to get through a week of something like that, you probably have to bring somebody with to give you a hand, so you have that expense on top of your own. That's airfare, hotels, food, ground transportation, and then whatever expensive equipment you need to use to do the things that you're doing. So, it was, I think right then and there, a bunch of us just ignorantly started saying, well, let's just change that, man. It's that easy. We're going to start a nonprofit. Heck yeah, let's do that, man. And I was like, well, who's running point on this? And, then it's like crickets, and I was like, well, where are we going to do it at? I don't know. How are we going to, a bunch of questions. And I was like, well, all right, I got a 2-car garage. We can use that. Somebody better come out and help me, because I'm not doing it alone. And 3 other guys moved to Poplar Grove, Illinois, in the middle of nowhere with me. And 4 guys in wheelchairs started building shelves in my garage. We filed for our nonprofit. They said it was going to take 2 years, or up to 2 years, to get approved. So we filed for an LLC the same day. And while we waited to get the approval, we started selling t-shirts to kind of market what we were doing and raise some money. 18 months later, we get the 501c3 approval. We got the t-shirt company going, and the t-shirt company was cool. At first it was like, well, do we merge them together? Do we keep them separate? It's like, well, okay, if somebody's gonna donate $1 to us, we want that whole dollar to be able to go to programming, right? Or we want it to be able to do what it's supposed to do. So why don't we keep the apparel company, and it can absorb all the expenses, like all the overhead to run the operation. And, and so it was just that, all right, let's do it that way. And now it's turned out to be a pretty cool thing. We got the two entities. They're essentially like perfect partners, because had we, in the beginning, we tried to get corporate partners. It was always, well, you guys don't have any sort of track record yet. You're brand new. No big company is going to put their name behind something that they don't know what the outcome is going to be, and if it has a track record. So we didn't have to worry about that with our own apparel company. It was perfect. It could do a lot of the things that we needed it to do. And now that was Veterans Day, 11/11/11, and 6.5, 7 years later almost, here we are. And now, instead of that first year helping a couple guys, now we're talking about helping 1,000 guys in a year.
Can you talk about your name, Oscar Mike, and what it means and how you guys came about with that?
Yep. So the mission was to get guys active and involved in adaptive sports. So keep them on the move, right? It was a term that we used on the radios in Iraq all the time. It was Oscar Mike, on the move. So it really, the second we said, well, what should we name it? It's like, well, somebody I think immediately said Oscar Mike, and it was like, duh. We don't even talk no more. It's done. We're gonna keep guys on the move. Oscar Mike. The only bad thing is sometimes people think that my name is either Oscar or Mike. You don't even need to know my name, and Oscar and Mike are not people's names. I mean, they are, but not in this sense.
Very cool story, man. I appreciate you sharing that. And once you got going with Oscar Mike, what were some of the challenges that you ran into, and how did you take your past experiences and overcome those?
Ignorance, because we didn't know anything. We just had an idea. We didn't know how to execute, and no funding. Very grassroots. Let's just build some shelves in the garage. We'll put a few T-shirts on there, and we'll see if people want to buy them. Create a website. So I think the hard parts were. I'm almost glad that we didn't have funding in the beginning. Because we would have taken other routes to get where we are today, and I would have hired somebody to build a website instead of learning how to do it myself. And I wouldn't have known how to code anything. I wouldn't have known the screen printing process. I wouldn't have known, like all of those small little things. I took accounting classes then, so I would have hired somebody had I had money to do all of those things. But since we didn't do that, we didn't have money, I had to learn them all myself. So then when you go to put somebody else in that position, you know exactly what you want out of it, and you know how to oversee it, basically. But those were definitely the struggles in the beginning. No funding, no experience.
So can you talk a little bit about the Oscar Mike Foundation and what your goal is, over the course of the next year? You're looking to raise funds, and you have an initiative going with Orange County Choppers and Spartan Races.
Yep, yeah, Spartan Race and Orange County Choppers. So Spartan Race had a bike produced by Orange County Choppers, and that show is airing on July 2nd. And Spartan's going to use that bike to raise $1 million for the Oscar Mike Foundation. And we have a facility that needs a ton of work, a new adaptive sports training facility, essentially, that we call the Compound. And they're going to help us get that where it needs to be, and maybe even work on our second one, because ideally it'd be nice to have another one in the Southwest region where you never have to combat weather. But we had to start somewhere, and starting in our own backyard was the spot to do it. That way we could be, the entire staff could be hands-on in the beginning. But yeah, that initiative with Spartan and Orange County Choppers is going to be huge. It's going to be a gigantic help for us. And we're getting a lot more requests for support from guys, and you know, we're getting to the point right now where we're turning people down because we don't have the funding. So we, you know, I think every day that goes by, we just are figuring out or trying to figure out how to get better at fundraising, because our time is spent helping people and, you know, like doing the things that we love to do to make a difference in people's lives, and it's not focused on raising money. And you know, it's a delicate balance, because we'd much rather spend time making a difference than raising money, but it's a necessary evil. You know, we got to figure out how to get better and better at that, so that we don't have to say no to people.
Sure.
You know?
What's one thing that you'd like our viewers to know about yourself, Oscar Mike, or the Oscar Mike Foundation that they might not already know?
Well, I think we've covered a lot here. Let's see. Well, there's a lot of ways to support it. You know, even if you don't have any money to give, time, support, sharing the mission with other people, you know, all of that kind of stuff. You can learn about it or go sign up for things at the website. It's oscarmike.org. There's a bunch of ways to give if you wanted to do it financially. You know, if you work for a company, corporate partnerships are really big for us, or, you know, can be. Individual donations, monthly donations, plan giving, donor advised funds, you name it. However you choose to give, we would be extremely grateful for any support that we can get. And like I said, if it can't be money, come out and join us at an event. You know, we can always use hands. And sometimes we do things like obstacle course races, like with Spartan Race, and it takes a lot of hands there to be able to get guys with disabilities all the way through a race safely and efficiently. So there's a ton of ways to help us.
So you mentioned it just now, but what are some of the other ways that viewers can find Oscar Mike? You got a website, Facebook, Instagram, and all those things?
Yeah, all the social media channels and the website are the best places to get us. You know, we try to keep everything, and then joining the email list, because I think you get a little bit more there, you know, and you get to see the new products that come out and stuff like that. So I'd sign up for the Facebook page or follow it, and Instagram, go to the website, and then get on the email list, and then you'll know everything.
Well, I appreciate your time, Noah, and I just I really want to have everybody go check out the Oscar Mike website. You know, there's a lot of value that you can get from it. I love their clothing is awesome, and the cool thing about any apparel that you buy from the organization is they send proceeds over to the Oscar Mike Foundation to help those disabled veterans. And I mean, it's such a great cause. Noah's such a great person. His staff is excellent here as well. So I just want to thank you all for watching, and Noah, appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks, man. The last thing I would say, I forgot to say this before, all the apparel is made in the US, and I feel like we're the only people left on the planet doing that. So every item that you find on our store is all American made, and it's a pain in the butt to keep that going. So we need as much support as we can. We're keeping a lot of different lights on at manufacturing facilities.
Awesome. You heard it from the man himself. Go check out the website, oscarmike.org. This episode of Vet Biz TV is brought to you by the Star Group, Insurance and Risk Solutions, serving and protecting veteran-owned businesses. The Wisconsin Veterans Chamber of Commerce. Our mission is your success. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Vet Biz TV. We really do appreciate you watching. If you have any questions or comments, please put them below. We'd love to hear your feedback. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel at www.vetbiz.tv. Just hit the subscribe button. You'll be informed of all of our newest episodes and content coming out. Again, I want to thank you again for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.